Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak against any repeal of the medical transfers known as the Medevac legislation. As was intended, the legislation that we passed earlier this year has ensured that sick people in detention on Manus Island in PNG and Nauru get the medical care that they need. This was our objective, given that the offshore facilities set up 6 years ago as temporary offshore regional processing centres have become a place of ongoing limbo, of indefinite detention for too many people, not providing adequate high-level health services for sick people who are in our care. This is a problem of the current government's own making. They've been in charge now for 6 years and have failed to help these vulnerable people. Before there's any howl of outrage from those opposite who seem to have missed the compassion gene in their DNA for this particular group of people, and sadly for many others, let's get some facts straight. The government has approved approximately 90 transfers to Australia on medical grounds, and 20 cases have been referred to the Independent Health Advice Panel, IHAP. Of the 20 cases referred to the IHAP, the panel has upheld the minister's decision not to transfer the individual on 13 occasions and overturned the minister's decision not to transfer on 7 occasions. So that is 7 times someone has been refused by the minister but overturned by the independent panel. This is a decision made by an independent panel of doctors that the minister himself chose. This panel includes some of Australia's best doctors, including the Commonwealth Chief Medical Officer and the Surgeon General of the Australian Border Force. There's one other important point to make about these 7 cases. The existing legislation that we worked hard to bring about ensured the minister had final discretion over medical transfers on national security, public safety or character grounds. So these 7 people who the minister objected to were not objected to because of any of those reasons. That tells me that Medevac is necessary and it's working. It tells me that the minister's claim that 2 doctors from Nimbin can force the government to bring people from Manus or Nauru to Australia is simply not the case. It tells me that the minister's claims that 1,000 people would flood Australia through Medevac is also not the case. If there are legitimate proposals to improve the operation of Medevac, then Minister Dutton should put those amendments forward rather than simply trying to repeal the entire legislation. The government has not built a case for repealing this legislation. What is the case is that this bill has allowed people who desperately need care to get the medical treatment they require. It's a human right, and one this government failed to deliver for so long. Last Saturday, the Hawkesbury branch of Rural Australians for Refugees held a vigil for the people on Manus and Nauru for whom medical care came too late. And I thank them for doing that, and for those who attended, for recognising the lives of people who've died and for mourning their deaths. These are people who, in their attempts to flee from war or torture or death, found themselves in detention. They're people like Hamid Kehazai, a man in his early 20s who died from a skin infection that turned into septicemia in August 2014. The Queensland coroner investigating the death found that doctors on the island had urged his immediate transfer to Australia, but this was first ignored, including by the Department of Immigration bureaucrats who didn't read their emails for up to 13 hours, and then it was rejected by the department. After further pleading from doctors trying to treat him, approval was finally granted 2 days after the initial request to move Hamid, by now semi-conscious and septic. But the department ordered that he be moved not to Australia but to Port Moresby's Pacific International Hospital. Here he was unfortunately misdiagnosed, treated with broken equipment and left unattended as he grew more and more critically ill. He suffered a series of cardiac arrests, and by the time he was transported to Brisbane's Mater Hospital, was profoundly brain damaged. Queensland Coroner Terry Ryan, in handing down his findings, said that Hamid's death was preventable and recommended that healthcare on the offshore islands be properly funded and run and under the control of doctors, or that asylum seekers and refugees be moved to Australia. Now, that was in 2014. There was no action by this government. The Independent Health Advice Panel tells us that the majority of medical consultations, even now on Nauru, are for mental health problems. In its first assessment of health facilities on Nauru, the Independent Health Panel found that there's no access to high-quality inpatient psychiatric care, and patients with severe mental illness are at a high risk of suicide and should be transferred to a hospital with appropriate inpatient psychiatric care. One of those who killed himself last year was 26-year-old Fariborz Karami. Fariborz was a Kurdish-Iranian asylum seeker who was the 12th person to die within Australia's offshore immigration detention centre since 2012. At the time, and now, there were serious concerns about his 12-year-old brother too. Both his brother and his mother had pleaded for medical help for him as he declined in the months leading up to his death. Now, we don't live in a country where life is cheap. These young men, people the age of my son, deserve a chance for a future. I want to mention the conditions that Medivac patients find themselves in, as reported in recent media reports. From what I have seen and read recently in The Guardian, it makes it clear that we are still missing some humanity in how we're treating people. They are still effectively in a prison for many of them. There are reports of hotel rooms in Brisbane being used while others are in detention centres between Brisbane and Adelaide, but the conditions are not necessarily those conducive to someone adequately being treated for a serious psychiatric condition. So I really urge the government that no matter where the treatment occurs, that we look to deliver high-quality health care as we are required to. I also refer to comments by the Minister for Health yesterday in question time talking about mental health, talking about the priority it was for not just this government but for this parliament. And I would ask that the minister apply those same principles to people who are in our care. We are responsible for people, and our mental health, their mental health is something that we can make a difference to. I think above all else, after 6 years of inaction, this government has to take up the renewed offer from the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, to resettle 150 people currently in offshore detention. It's a deal that's been open to the government for years, and not a move has been made to take it. It would allow more people to be resettled and to rebuild their lives, as the US agreement does, and that must also be completed as planned. The Governor of Manus Island, Charlie Benjamin, is also urging Australia to help resettle refugees to a third country. This is something that everyone wants to see, and I welcome comments by some of the members opposite, like the member for Monash, who recognises that Australia can't continue indefinite detention and is urging his own government to finish resettling detainees. It is good to hear that sentiment coming from the other side of the House. Unless someone try to take my words, these words, out of context, let me reiterate that Labor's position on border protection is clear. We do support strong borders, and our policy and my advocacy for these measures doesn't change any of that. You can have strong borders and you can show humanity and compassion for refugees and asylum seekers. They are not in conflict with each other, and I wish that this government would remember that.